The people who make the rules for Formula One racing have changed some important rules for the rest of 2024, and it looks like we're going to get an even more exciting second half of the season. Starting from the brake system changes, the tire, testing, and how they give out penalties, all the way to what happens when drivers stop on the track during practice runs. These changes are things that the racing teams will want to look at very carefully before the season keeps going. The big question is, how much can they actually get better because of this? Formula One is a sport that is always changing and getting better. And in 2024, we're going to see a huge number of changes for the second half of the season. Let's start with the most important and probably the most interesting one, the braking system, or more specifically, the brake parts and how the pressure gets spread around. The new Rule 11.1 says that any system or part that can make the brakes work differently on purpose between the left and right wheels on the same axle is not allowed. Obviously, if a rule like this gets made, it kind of suggests that a team has found a way to do something outside of the normal front-to-back brake changes, which have been used before by Mercedes with their brake magic system. So this means a team has definitely done something interesting with their brake maps or brake controls that lets them make braking better, not just front to back, but in the pattern of left front, left rear, and right rear. And this is huge for how well cars can take corners. When such a typical and clear mid-season rule gets added in the middle of the season, it means one of two things. Either the rule makers found out, saw, or got a report from other teams that a certain team on the grid was doing this as a gray area and they thought it wasn't in the spirit of the rules. Just like what happened with the famous DAS system. Or the second choice could be that the people in charge had completely missed this rule on their end, and now they're closing this rule loophole, which is now a case of them asking the teams to follow what needs to be done properly. Also, it's worth knowing that teams do change things on the rear side, specifically with the diffuser and how locked or unlocked it is. But sideways braking is a tool that can be used massively by the teams. Just like how the diffuser is used to help with balance and cornering of the car, we should be seeing a lot of changes from practically all of the teams on the grid if this turns out to be true, and it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to changes being put on the cars in the second half of the season. The test car testing, or the TMC 1010, is a big addition to the rules because from now on a team could use a car at any track during running time. They can use cars that follow the current rules of any of the 4 calendar years that fall right before the calendar year of the championship. But it's changed for the purpose of providing track testing of future products. This will allow the teams to build cars that are based on the chassis from the current season through the last 4 seasons, which obviously include the time before the ground effect era. This lets them do on-track testing mainly for the upcoming 2026 rules, as well as understanding how to make the gap to Red Bull smaller, also in 2024. Obviously, 2026 will be the main goal because the teams would now have to understand a lot more. In an era that looks to be anybody's guess in terms of development and engine power. And these test runs will be really fascinating to watch because of the minimal changes that the cars are expected to go through for the necessary purpose of testing desired parts, given the fact that teams like Ferrari and McLaren as well as Mercedes are not done with the 2024 upgrades. It would be a huge boost for them to be even closer to Red Bull when 2025 starts. This is because Horner and the team are now sure that they have reached the ceiling with the RB20, and not a lot of performance is left to be unlocked. A little bit easier to understand rule has also been introduced by the rule makers, and that is the carrying over of time penalties. We've seen drivers being penalized multiple times, and when we say drivers, we think mainly of Albon and Magnussen. But they've been serving them throughout the race, so it wasn't making any difference at all. Now, 5 or 10-second penalties can be carried to the next race if the driver is unclassified in the race, retirement happens, or it's in addition to pit lane drive-thrus or stop-and-goes. A driver, however, must run more than 90% of the racecourse distance to be considered classified, and this is now definitely stopping the teams from trying something sneaky when they're being given a penalty, such as Norris when he served the 5-second penalty. Before he retired the car in Austria. Another very interesting change is about to happen when a car stops during a practice process. And this has been prompted by Carlos Sainz's situation in China. From now on, the 39.6 article says that any driver whose car stops on the track in any other area other than the pit lane during the practice session or the sprint practice session and receives physical help will not be allowed to take any further part in that session. The latter part was already obvious, as Perez asked his racing engineer to push his car from the gravel in Silverstone, and his team told him that this will be considered mechanical help and they will be automatically disqualified. To make this simple, if the car stops on track and the driver is able to get it going on his own, then no problems should happen to the practice process. And in the previous rule era, it said that any driver's car stops on track in any other area other than the pit lane during the session, the drivers won't be able to continue with the practice process, which is what led Aston Martin to protest. These results the most as a team that was heavily affected by it during Saturday's sessions. This is definitely considered a step in the right direction. But there are situations in which sometimes a car stopping in the middle of the road could cause a double yellow flag or a red flag scenario in which the other drivers would be forced to abandon their fast laps. And if the car that stopped on track is able to get running again, the flags would have been practically for nothing. Also, Formula One could look over their shoulder at another championship like IndyCar, where a driver who causes a red flag during practice loses their 2 fastest laps, and if he causes a yellow flag, loses one of their fastest laps, while the other drivers can continue without any consequences. These changes are very interesting, and will definitely create a very interesting turn of events in 2024. Mostly because the majority of them have been happening in the first 14 races, which is why the rule makers were more or less prompted to look into changing the rule book a bit more than usual, whether or not it would result in better results, in better racing, or whether some teams will be exposed by their braking systems. Time will tell. As of now, we've seen that Red Bull has protested the legality of McLaren and Mercedes' front wings, or more precisely how they bend, which brought to a race full of sensors in Spa on this particular part of the car in order to make sure that everything is running smoothly from the Austrian team's fiercest competitors. While this is definitely a step in the right direction, every rule change has its negative opinion and a lot of people who disagree. So we would still have to wait and see how the other teams will be in terms of fighting back regarding these changes. And it would be easy to assume that the ones who will protest the most will be the ones who will be affected the most by this bunch of changes. As of now, Red Bull is certain that there are not a lot of changes to the car, even though they will continue with the upgrades. And Verstappen himself is sure that a scenario like this was to be expected. It's just a surprise that the other teams were able to catch up so quickly to the Austrian squad. Talking more about the team's expectations for 2024, Verstappen said, "You are always searching for more performance, but sometimes you have to be realistic. Maybe there isn't more to be found, but it's just trying to stay at that level, even though it's incredibly hard. We are not robots. I know it's tough to not compare ourselves to last year's performance, but it's just how it goes, right? To operate at that level, it's maybe something that we'll look back on in 20 years and everyone may appreciate a little bit more of what we did as a team. For me, even now, maybe we don't have the quickest car. It doesn't really change the mentality. We are always trying to get back to that level." With all this in mind, what do you think these changes will bring to the cars and to the grid in general? And more precisely, do you think that they'll improve the racing experience of all 20 drivers on the grid? Let us know in the comments below. And once you do that, have a look at the video that's appearing on your screen right now.